Sophie Helen Rhys-Jones stood before the tall mirror in her dressing room at Bagshot Park, adjusting the sapphire brooch that had belonged to her late mother-in-law, Queen Elizabeth II. The morning light streamed through the Georgian windows, casting a warm glow across the room, where she had prepared for countless royal engagements over the past 25 years. Today felt different, though. Today marked not just another duty, but a personal milestone that would be celebrated in ways she never could have imagined when she first met Prince Edward at a tennis event in 1993. The Duchess of Edinburgh, as she had been known since May 2023 following King Charles III's coronation, was turning 60 years old. The date was January 20th, 2025, and the royal household had been quietly planning celebrations that would honor not just her birthday, but her remarkable transformation from a public relations executive to one of the most respected members of the British royal family. As Sophie fastened her pearl earrings, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Born in Oxford in 1965 to a tire company salesman and a secretary, she had grown up in a middle-class family in Brenchley, Kent. Her childhood had been filled with writing lessons, school plays, and dreams of working in the fashion industry. Nothing in her early years had suggested she would one day become a duchess. Yet here she was, preparing for a day that would see tributes pour in from around the world. The sound of footsteps in the corridor announced the arrival of her private secretary, who entered carrying a leather folder thick with the day's correspondence. Letters had been arriving for weeks from organizations, charities, and individuals whose lives had been touched by Sophie's work. The folder contained just a fraction of the messages, but each one represented a life changed, a cause supported, or a moment of kindness remembered. Prince Edward appeared in the doorway, already dressed in his morning suit, a gentle smile playing across his face. After nearly 3 decades together, he still looked at his wife with the same admiration he had felt when they first danced together at that charity event all those years ago. Their love story had weathered public scrutiny, media storms, and the unique pressures of royal life, emerging stronger with each passing year. The preparations for Sophie's birthday had begun months earlier, orchestrated by a team that included members of the royal household, representatives from her patronages, and officials from Buckingham Palace. The centerpiece of the celebrations would be the unveiling of an official portrait commissioned by the Royal Collection Trust and painted by renowned artist Jonathan Yeo, who had previously created portraits of King Charles III and other members of the royal family. The decision to commission a formal portrait had not been taken lightly. Royal portraits carry deep significance, serving as historical records that will hang in palaces and public buildings for generations to come. The choice of Jonathan Yeo reflected the royal family's desire to work with contemporary artists who could capture not just physical likeness, but the essence of their subject's character and contribution to public life. Yeo had spent months studying Sophie's work, attending her engagements, and observing her interactions with the public. He had been struck by her natural warmth, her genuine interest in the people she met, and her ability to make everyone feel valued and heard. These qualities, he determined, would be central to his artistic interpretation. The portrait sessions had taken place over several weeks at Buckingham Palace, in a room specially prepared with the right lighting and backdrop. Sophie had worn the same outfit for each session, a deep blue dress that complemented her eyes, and a necklace that had been a wedding gift from Queen Elizabeth II. The choice was deliberate, reflecting her respect for tradition while maintaining her own distinctive style. During the painting sessions, Sophie and Yeo had engaged in long conversations about art, history, and her role within the royal family. These discussions had revealed a woman of considerable intellect and depth, someone who had thought carefully about her position and its responsibilities. Yeo had been particularly impressed by her knowledge of the charities she supported and her hands-on approach to her patronages. As the morning progressed, Sophie made her way to the morning room, where she always began her days by reviewing her schedule and correspondence. The walls were lined with photographs from her various engagements. Images of her with survivors of sexual violence during her work with the UN, pictures from her visits to military families, and candid shots from her numerous charity events. Each photograph told a story of service and commitment. Her work had evolved significantly since her marriage to Prince Edward in 1999. Initially, there had been challenges as she navigated the transition from private citizen to royal family member. The media scrutiny had been intense, and there had been missteps along the way. However, Sophie had learned from these experiences, gradually developing into one of the monarchy's most effective ambassadors. Her patronages reflected her genuine interests and passions. She had become a powerful advocate for preventing sexual violence in conflict zones, working closely with the UN and traveling to some of the world's most dangerous regions to highlight these issues. Her work in this area had been particularly significant, as she had been one of the first members of the royal family to speak openly about such difficult subjects. The military had also become central to her work, particularly in supporting the families of service personnel. As the colonel-in-chief of several regiments and patron of numerous military charities, she had developed deep relationships within the armed forces community. Her genuine concern for military families and her understanding of the unique challenges they faced had earned her tremendous respect within these circles. Sophie's approach to royal duties had always been characterized by thorough preparation and genuine engagement. She read extensively about the organizations she visited, memorized the names of key personnel, and often surprised people with her detailed knowledge of their work. This preparation was not just professional courtesy. It reflected her genuine interest in making her visits meaningful and productive. The morning's correspondence included letters from many of the organizations she supported. The CEO of a military charity wrote about the impact of her patronage on their fundraising efforts and the morale boost her visits provided to military families. A representative from a women's rights organization detailed how her UN work had helped bring international attention to their cause. Teachers from a school she regularly visited described how her interest in their pupils' achievements had inspired an entire generation of children. These letters painted a picture of a royal who had found her niche and was making a real difference. Unlike some royal engagements that could feel ceremonial or superficial, Sophie's work was characterized by depth, continuity, and measurable impact. She had developed expertise in her chosen areas and used her platform to effect genuine change. As she read through the messages, Sophie was joined by her children, Lady Louise Windsor and James, Earl of Wessex. Both young adults now, they had grown up watching their mother balance royal duties with family life, and they had developed deep admiration for her dedication and authenticity. Louise, now at university, had written a particularly moving tribute to her mother that would be read later during the day's celebrations. The children's presence reminded Sophie of one of her proudest achievements, raising grounded, compassionate children despite the unique pressures of royal life. She and Edward had made deliberate choices to give their children as normal a childhood as possible, including decisions about their education and their level of exposure to royal duties. The results spoke for themselves in the confident, caring young adults they had become. The day's official program would begin with a private family celebration at Bagshot Park, followed by the portrait unveiling at Buckingham Palace. The afternoon would include a reception for representatives from her various patronages, and the evening would conclude with a dinner hosted by King Charles III and Queen Camilla. Each element had been carefully planned to reflect different aspects of Sophie's life and work. The portrait unveiling, in particular, promised to be a significant moment. Beyond its artistic merit, the painting represented official recognition of Sophie's contribution to the monarchy and British public life. It would hang alongside portraits of other significant royal figures, ensuring her legacy would be preserved for future generations. As the morning drew to a close, Sophie took a final look at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back had traveled far from the young PR executive who had once worked for her own company. She had faced criticism, learned from mistakes, and emerged as a respected figure who had found meaningful ways to serve. The sapphire brooch caught the light, a tangible connection to the woman who had welcomed her into the royal family and who, she hoped, would have been proud of what she had achieved. The celebration of her 60th birthday would be more than a personal milestone. It would be a recognition of a life dedicated to service and a testament to the possibility of growth, learning, and positive impact within the unique constraints and opportunities of royal life. The journey to Buckingham Palace that afternoon carried special significance for Sophie as her official car made its way through the familiar streets of London. The route from Bagshot Park to the palace had been traveled countless times over the years, but today felt different. Crowds had begun gathering along the route, many holding handmade signs celebrating her birthday and her work. The spontaneous display of public affection touched her deeply, reminding her of how much her role had evolved since those early, uncertain days following her marriage. The palace staff had been preparing for weeks, transforming the yellow drawing room into the perfect setting for the portrait unveiling. The room, with its silk-lined walls and magnificent chandeliers, had hosted countless historical moments, and now it would witness another significant occasion in royal history. The portrait, still concealed behind an elegant drape, stood positioned where the afternoon light would illuminate it perfectly. Jonathan Yeo arrived early, accompanied by representatives from the Royal Collection Trust and officials from the National Portrait Gallery. As the artist who had captured Sophie's essence on canvas, he carried the weight of responsibility for creating something that would endure for generations. His previous royal portraits had been well received, but this commission felt particularly important given the personal journey it represented. The guest list for the unveiling reflected the breadth of Sophie's work and interests. Military officials stood alongside charity representatives, while diplomats mingled with local community leaders. Each guest had been personally selected because of their connection to Sophie's work, ensuring that the audience would understand and appreciate the significance of both the portrait and the woman it depicted. Lord Chamberlain welcomed the gathering, speaking briefly about the tradition of royal portraiture and its role in preserving history. He noted that royal portraits serve multiple purposes. They document individuals at significant moments in their lives, but they also capture the essence of their contribution to the monarchy and the nation. In Sophie's case, the portrait would commemorate not just her 60th birthday, but her remarkable transformation into one of the royal family's most effective and respected members. When Sophie arrived at the palace, she was greeted by King Charles III and Queen Camilla, who had insisted on being present for this important moment. The king's presence was particularly meaningful, as it represented the official recognition of Sophie's status within the family hierarchy. Charles had watched his sister-in-law's development with admiration, particularly appreciating her dedication to causes that aligned with his own interests in social justice and international cooperation. The ceremony began with a short speech by the king, who spoke movingly about Sophie's journey and her contributions to the monarchy. He highlighted her work with survivors of sexual violence, describing it as groundbreaking in its scope and impact. Her willingness to tackle difficult subjects and travel to dangerous regions had, he noted, demonstrated a level of commitment that went far beyond traditional royal duties. Charles also emphasized Sophie's military work, noting how she had become a beloved figure within the armed forces community. Her regular visits to military bases, her attendance at homecoming ceremonies, and her support for military families had created genuine bonds that strengthened the connection between the monarchy and the military. This relationship was particularly important given the monarchy's constitutional role as the source of military authority. The king's speech included personal observations about Sophie's character, describing her as someone who approached every engagement with genuine interest and preparation. He noted that she read extensively about the organization she visited, often surprising hosts with her detailed knowledge and thoughtful questions. This level of engagement, he observed, transformed routine visits into meaningful exchanges that benefited everyone involved. Queen Camilla then spoke about Sophie's role within the family, describing her as a source of wisdom and support for other family members. She noted that Sophie had navigated the challenges of marrying into the royal family with grace and determination, learning from early difficulties and emerging stronger. Her experience had made her a valuable mentor for other family members facing similar challenges. The moment arrived for the portrait unveiling. Sophie stood beside the covered artwork, joined by Prince Edward, their children, and other senior family members. The gathered guests fell silent as the drape was carefully removed, revealing Jonathan Yeo's masterpiece for the first time to the assembled audience. The portrait was immediately striking in its depth and sensitivity. Yeo had captured Sophie in a three-quarter pose, wearing the deep blue dress and Queen Elizabeth's necklace that had been chosen for the sessions. But beyond the technical excellence of the painting, what struck viewers was the artist's success in capturing Sophie's essential character. Her warmth, intelligence, and quiet strength were all evident in the work. The composition was carefully designed to convey multiple messages. Sophie was positioned with a subtle suggestion of movement, as if she had just paused in the middle of an important conversation. Her expression was warm but serious, reflecting both her approachability and her dedication to important causes. The background included subtle references to her various patronages, a small military insignia, books that suggested her commitment to education, and other carefully chosen details. The color palette was rich but restrained, dominated by the blue of her dress, but including warmer tones that suggested humanity and compassion. Yeo had paid particular attention to Sophie's hands, positioning them in a way that suggested both elegance and capability. The overall effect was of a woman comfortable with her position, but never forgetting the responsibility it carried. The response from the assembled guests was immediately positive. Military officers noted how the portrait captured the respect and affection Sophie had earned within their community. Charity representatives saw reflected in the painting the dedicated advocate they knew from countless meetings and events. Diplomats recognized the skilled international representative who had enhanced Britain's reputation through her UN work. Jonathan Yeo spoke about his approach to the portrait, explaining how he had sought to capture not just physical likeness, but the essence of Sophie's contribution to public life. He described the challenge of representing someone whose work was so varied, from her international humanitarian efforts to her local community engagements. The solution had been to focus on the common thread running through all her work, her genuine care for others and her commitment to making a positive difference. The artist also discussed the technical aspects of the painting, noting how he had used light and shadow to create depth and dimension. The pose had been carefully chosen to suggest both accessibility and dignity, while the background elements added layers of meaning without overwhelming the central figure. The overall composition was designed to work both as an artistic achievement and as a historical document. Following the unveiling, guests were invited to view the portrait more closely and to meet with Sophie personally. These conversations revealed the depth of impact her work had achieved across diverse communities. A young woman who had benefited from one of Sophie's educational initiatives spoke movingly about how the Duchess's support had changed her life trajectory. A military family described how Sophie's presence at a difficult homecoming ceremony had provided crucial emotional support during a challenging time. These personal testimonies highlighted an important aspect of Sophie's approach to royal duties, her ability to connect with individuals rather than simply fulfilling ceremonial obligations. While many royal engagements necessarily involve large groups and formal protocols, Sophie had developed a reputation for finding ways to make personal connections even within these constraints. The portrait would remain on display at Buckingham Palace for several weeks before beginning a tour of locations connected to Sophie's work. This tour had been carefully planned to include military bases, charitable organizations, and educational institutions that had benefited from her patronage. The goal was to ensure that communities across the country could see and appreciate this artistic celebration of her contributions. As the formal unveiling concluded, guests moved to an adjacent reception room where they could continue conversations and share memories of their interactions with Sophie. The atmosphere was warm and celebratory, reflecting the genuine affection that her work had generated across diverse communities. Representatives from different organizations found themselves discovering common themes in Sophie's approach to her various roles. The afternoon's events had successfully achieved their intended purpose, celebrating not just a birthday milestone, but a quarter-century of dedicated service that had evolved into something truly meaningful. The portrait would serve as a permanent reminder of this achievement, capturing a moment when Sophie had fully grown in her role and was being recognized for the difference she had made in countless lives. The afternoon reception that followed the portrait unveiling provided an opportunity for deeper conversations about Sophie's impact across her various patronages. Representatives from dozens of organizations had traveled to London specifically for this celebration, each bringing stories that illustrated different aspects of her work and its far-reaching effects on communities throughout the United Kingdom and beyond. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a psychiatrist who worked with survivors of sexual violence, found herself in conversation with Colonel James Harrison, whose regiment had benefited from Sophie's patronage for over 15 years. Despite their vastly different professional backgrounds, they discovered remarkable similarities in how Sophie approached her work with their respective organizations. Both noted her exceptional preparation, her ability to ask meaningful questions, and her genuine commitment to understanding complex issues. Dr. Mitchell recalled Sophie's visit to a specialized treatment center for trauma survivors, where she had spent hours learning about therapeutic approaches and meeting with patients who felt comfortable sharing their experiences. Rather than simply touring the facility and making polite conversation, Sophie had engaged deeply with the clinical staff, asking detailed questions about treatment methods and outcomes. This level of engagement had continued long after the visit, with Sophie regularly requesting updates on the center's work and helping to secure additional funding through a network of contacts. Colonel Harrison shared a similar story from a military context. When Sophie had visited his regiment before their deployment to Afghanistan, she had taken time to understand not just the military mission, but the personal challenges facing service members and their families. She had met privately with spouses who were concerned about the deployment, and she had made specific commitments to maintain contact during the absence. True to her word, she had sent regular messages to the families and had been present at the homecoming ceremony to welcome the soldiers back. These conversations revealed a pattern that characterized all of Sophie's work: her commitment to understanding the real challenges facing the people and organizations she supported. Rather than maintaining the distance that often characterized royal engagements, she had developed an approach that combined appropriate protocol with genuine personal investment in outcomes. Mary Thompson, who directed a women's shelter in Manchester, described how Sophie's patronage had transformed not just their funding situation, but their entire approach to advocacy. Sophie had visited the shelter multiple times, learning about the complex factors that led women to seek refuge and the challenges they faced in rebuilding their lives. During these visits, she had identified opportunities to connect the shelter's work with broader policy discussions taking place at national and international levels. Through Sophie's influence, the shelter had been invited to provide input on government policy discussions about domestic violence prevention. Representatives had been included in parliamentary committees, and their research had been cited in international forums. This elevation of local expertise to national and global platforms exemplified Sophie's understanding of how royal patronage could be used most effectively. The reception also included representatives from educational institutions that had benefited from Sophie's support. Professor David Shunn from a technical college in Wales described how her involvement had helped transform the institution's approach to supporting students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Sophie had not simply agreed to serve as patron. She had worked with the college to develop innovative programs that address specific barriers to educational success. Her support had extended beyond ceremonial appearances to include practical assistance with curriculum development, industry partnerships, and student mentoring programs. Sophie had used her connections to arrange internships and job placements for graduates, and she had helped establish scholarship funds that enabled talented students to complete their education despite financial challenges. The college's success rates had improved dramatically, and the model they developed had been adopted by other institutions across the country. These success stories were complemented by testimony from individuals whose lives had been directly touched by Sophie's work. Emma Williams, a former service member who had struggled with post-traumatic stress following her deployment, spoke about meeting Sophie at a veteran support event. Rather than the brief, formal interaction that Emma had expected, Sophie had spent considerable time learning about Emma's experiences and the challenges facing female veterans. This conversation had led to Sophie's involvement in developing specialized programs for female service members, addressing issues that had previously received little attention within military support structures. Emma had subsequently been involved in designing these programs, and she now worked full-time helping other veterans navigate the transition to civilian life. Her transformation from struggling veteran to successful advocate illustrated the broader impact of Sophie's commitment to understanding and addressing real problems. The international dimension of Sophie's work was represented by diplomats and UN officials who had worked with her on preventing sexual violence in conflict zones. Ambassador Patricia Reynolds described Sophie's evolution into a formidable advocate on the global stage, noting how her initial hesitation about tackling such difficult subject had given way to passionate and informed advocacy. Sophie's UN work had taken her to some of the world's most challenging environments, including refugee camps and conflict zones where she had met with survivors and advocates working under extremely difficult conditions. Her willingness to engage with these realities, rather than limiting herself to comfortable diplomatic settings, had earned her credibility within international human rights circles. Ambassador Reynolds noted that Sophie's advocacy had been particularly effective because of her ability to connect individual stories with broader policy discussions. She could speak movingly about specific people she had met while also engaging with complex legal and diplomatic frameworks for addressing sexual violence. This combination of personal testimony and policy expertise had made her an unusually effective advocate within UN systems. The reception also highlighted the collaborative approach that Sophie had developed with other members of the royal family. Rather than competing for attention or duplicating efforts, she had worked to identify areas where her interests and expertise could complement the work of other family members. Her military focus complemented Prince William's work with veterans, while her international advocacy aligned with broader royal family commitments to human rights and international cooperation. This collaborative approach extended beyond the royal family to include partnerships with other public figures and organizations. Sophie had been particularly successful at building coalitions that could achieve more than any single advocate or organization working alone. Her ability to bring together diverse stakeholders around common goals had become one of her most valuable contributions to the causes she supported. As the afternoon progressed, it became clear that the celebration was about more than recognizing past achievements. Many of the conversations focused on future plans and the potential for expanding successful programs. Sophie's 60th birthday represented not an endpoint, but a milestone in what was expected to be a continuing journey of service and impact. The energy and enthusiasm evident among the reception guests reflected the genuine excitement that Sophie's work had generated across diverse communities. Unlike some charitable work that could feel dutiful or obligatory, her patronages had developed into dynamic partnerships that were producing measurable results and inspiring others to become involved. The afternoon concluded with a brief address by Sophie herself, in which she thanked the assembled representatives for their dedication and acknowledged that any success achieved through her patronages reflected the hard work and commitment of countless individuals across all the organizations represented. Her remarks demonstrated the humility and genuine appreciation that had characterized her approach throughout her royal career. The speech also outlined her vision for the future, emphasizing her commitment to continuing and expanding the work that had become central to her identity as a royal family member. She spoke about the importance of using her platform to address real problems and to support people and organizations that were making genuine differences in their communities. The assembled guests responded with enthusiasm, clearly energized by the prospect of continuing their partnerships with someone who had proven her dedication and effectiveness over many years of consistent effort. As evening approached, the formal celebrations moved to the state dining room at Buckingham Palace, where King Charles III and Queen Camilla were hosting a dinner in Sophie's honor. The guest list had been carefully curated to include senior members of the royal family, government officials, diplomatic representatives, and leaders from the organizations closest to Sophie's heart. The setting itself was magnificent, with the table laid with the George IV state service and decorated with flowers from the palace gardens. The dinner represented the culmination of a day that had celebrated not just a personal milestone, but a remarkable journey of service and dedication. As guests assembled in the adjoining drawing room for pre-dinner drinks, the conversations reflected the deep respect that Sophie had earned across diverse sectors of British society and international communities. Prime Minister Sarah Johnson was among the government representatives present, and her remarks during the pre-dinner reception highlighted the unique role that Sophie had carved out within the constitutional framework of the monarchy. The Prime Minister noted that Sophie's work had enhanced Britain's international reputation, particularly in areas of human rights and military affairs, while her domestic patronages had supported government policy objectives in education and social welfare. The international dimension of Sophie's work was further emphasized by the presence of several ambassadors and UN officials who had collaborated with her on various initiatives. Their presence at such an intimate royal gathering reflected the serious regard with which her contributions were viewed within diplomatic and international development communities. Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Robert Williams, offered a brief blessing before the dinner began, acknowledging Sophie's commitment to service and her embodiment of Christian values of compassion and dedication to others. His remarks noted that her work had demonstrated how positions of privilege could be used effectively to serve those in greatest need, providing a model of ethical leadership that extended far beyond her formal role within the royal family. As guests moved into the state dining room, they were struck by the careful attention paid to every detail of the evening. The seating arrangement had been designed to facilitate meaningful conversations while respecting protocol requirements. Sophie was seated between King Charles III and a general who had worked closely with her on military family support initiatives, ensuring that the conversation would touch on both family matters and her professional interests. The menu for the evening had been chosen to reflect Sophie's preferences while maintaining the formal standard appropriate for a state dinner. The courses included British seasonal ingredients prepared by the palace's renowned kitchen staff, with wine selections that honored both the celebratory nature of the occasion and the diverse backgrounds of the guests. During the meal, King Charles rose to deliver a more personal tribute to his sister-in-law, reflecting on the journey that had brought her from private citizen to respected royal family member. His speech was both warm and substantive, acknowledging the challenges she had faced while celebrating the remarkable achievements that had emerged from her dedication to growth and service. The king's remarks included specific examples of Sophie's impact, drawing on stories shared by organizations and individuals throughout the day. He spoke about military families who had been supported through difficult deployments, students who had achieved educational success through programs she had helped establish, and survivors of violence who had found hope and healing through her advocacy work. Charles also addressed the evolution of the monarchy itself, noting how Sophie's work exemplified the institution's ability to adapt and find new ways to serve contemporary needs. Her willingness to tackle difficult subjects and work in challenging environments had demonstrated that royal service could be both traditional and innovative, respectful of history, while responsive to current realities. The king's speech included personal observations about Sophie's character, describing her intellectual curiosity, her genuine empathy, and her remarkable ability to connect with people from all backgrounds. He noted that these qualities had made her an invaluable member of the royal family and had enabled her to represent British values effectively in international settings. Following the king's remarks, several other speakers rose to offer their own tributes. General Patricia Adams, who had worked extensively with Sophie on military matters, described her as someone who had earned genuine respect within the armed forces community through her commitment and understanding. She noted that Sophie's support for military families had gone far beyond ceremonial appearances to include substantive advocacy for improved services and support systems. Dr. Michael Thompson, representing the UN's efforts to prevent sexual violence in conflict zones, spoke about Sophie's courage in taking on such difficult work and her effectiveness as an advocate for survivors. He noted that her willingness to visit dangerous regions and meet with survivors had brought crucial attention to these issues and had helped secure increased funding and political support for prevention programs. The evening also included presentations of special recognition from several of Sophie's patronages. These presentations were brief but meaningful, acknowledging specific contributions that had made lasting differences to the organizations involved. Rather than generic tributes, each presentation highlighted concrete achievements and outcomes that demonstrated the practical impact of her work. Lady Louise Windsor delivered a particularly moving tribute on behalf of the younger generation of the royal family. Her remarks focus on the example that Sophie had set as both a royal family member and a mother, demonstrating how to balance public duties with personal values and family commitments. Louise spoke about growing up with a mother who took her responsibilities seriously while never losing sight of what truly mattered in life. The tribute from a younger generation was significant because it highlighted the continuity of values and commitment that Sophie had helped establish within the family. Her approach to royal duties had influenced other family members and had contributed to the monarchy's evolution into an institution that was both respectful of tradition and responsive to contemporary needs. Prince Edward's remarks were necessarily brief due to protocol, but they conveyed deep personal appreciation for his wife's support and partnership throughout their marriage. He spoke about watching her transformation from a successful businesswoman into a dedicated royal family member, noting that this evolution had been achieved without compromising her essential character or values. Edward also acknowledged the personal cost of Sophie's dedication, noting that her commitment to her patronages often required significant travel and time away from family. He emphasized that this sacrifice had been undertaken willingly because of her genuine belief in the importance of the work and her determination to use her platform effectively. The dinner concluded with Sophie's own remarks, which were characteristically modest and focused on acknowledging the contributions of others rather than celebrating her own achievements. She spoke about the privilege of working with dedicated professionals across various fields and emphasized that any success she had achieved reflected the commitment and expertise of countless individuals who had partnered with her over the years. Sophie's speech also looked toward the future, outlining her continued commitment to the causes that had become central to her identity as a royal family member. She spoke about upcoming initiatives and her determination to expand programs that had proven successful, while also remaining open to new opportunities to serve. The evening concluded with informal conversations that continued the themes from earlier in the day. Guests shared additional stories and insights about Sophie's work, creating a rich tapestry of appreciation that reflected the breadth and depth of her impact across diverse communities. As the formal celebrations drew to a close, it was clear that the day had achieved its intended purpose of recognizing not just a birthday milestone, but a remarkable record of service that had enhanced the monarchy's relevance and effectiveness. The portrait, the testimonials, and the gathering of people whose lives have been touched by Sophie's work all contributed to a comprehensive celebration of a life dedicated to meaningful service. The evening's success lay not just in its formal elements, but in the genuine warmth and appreciation that had characterized every interaction throughout the day. This reflected the authentic relationships that Sophie had built through her consistent commitment to understanding and supporting the people and organizations she served. The weeks following Sophie's birthday celebrations brought a remarkable outpouring of recognition and appreciation that extended far beyond the formal events at Buckingham Palace. Letters, messages, and tributes continued to arrive from around the world, creating a comprehensive picture of the impact her 25 years of royal service had achieved across diverse communities and causes. The portrait by Jonathan Yeo had begun its planned tour of locations connected to Sophie's work, and each venue reported overwhelming public interest. When the painting was displayed at the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, thousands of military personnel and their families visited to see the artwork and learn more about Sophie's contributions to military welfare. The Academy's commandant noted that the portrait had sparked renewed interest in the various programs that Sophie had helped establish to support service families. At the United Nations headquarters in New York, where the portrait was displayed for a special exhibition on preventing sexual violence in conflict zones, diplomats and human rights advocates gathered to view the painting and discuss Sophie's contributions to international efforts in this challenging field. UN Secretary-General Maria Santos used the occasion to announce new funding for programs that Sophie had helped develop, crediting her advocacy with raising global awareness and political support for these crucial initiatives. The tour also included several educational institutions that had benefited from Sophie's patronage. At the Technical College in Wales that had transformed its approach to supporting disadvantaged students, the portrait's arrival coincided with graduation ceremonies for students who had succeeded through programs Sophie had helped establish. Many graduates specifically requested to have their photographs taken with the portrait, seeing it as a symbol of the opportunities that had been created through her support. Media coverage of the birthday celebrations and the subsequent portrait tour had been overwhelmingly positive, with commentators noting how Sophie's approach to royal duties had evolved the institution's relevance for contemporary audiences. Royal correspondents highlighted the substance behind her ceremonial role, noting that her patronages had achieved measurable outcomes rather than simply maintaining traditional appearances. International media attention was particularly significant, with major publications in the United States, Canada, Australia, and throughout Europe featuring articles about Sophie's work and its global impact. The coverage emphasized her role in enhancing Britain's soft power through her humanitarian advocacy and her effectiveness as a cultural ambassador who could engage with complex international issues while representing British values. The response from charitable organizations had been particularly gratifying. The Directory of Social Change, which monitors charitable giving and effectiveness in the United Kingdom, published a special report analyzing the impact of royal patronage on organizational outcomes. Sophie's patronages were highlighted as examples of how royal involvement could generate substantive benefits beyond simple fundraising, including enhanced public awareness, improved government relations, and increased volunteer recruitment. Academic institutions had also taken notice of Sophie's approach to royal service. Several universities announced research projects examining the evolution of royal patronage and its contemporary relevance, using Sophie's work as a primary case study. These academic analyses were contributing to broader discussions about the monarchy's role in modern democratic societies and its potential for addressing contemporary challenges. The military community's response had been particularly meaningful to Sophie personally. Regimental associations, veterans organizations, and military charities had organized their own celebrations and tributes, often featuring testimonials from service families who had been directly supported through programs she had championed. These grassroots celebrations demonstrated the authentic relationships she had built within military communities. One particularly moving tribute came from the Royal British Legion, which announced the establishment of a new support program for military spouses, named in Sophie's honor. The program would provide career counseling, educational support, and networking opportunities for spouses whose own professional development had been challenged by the demands of military life. The Legion's leadership noted that this initiative directly addressed issues that Sophie had identified through her extensive engagement with military families. International recognition had also continued to grow following the birthday celebrations. The UN Women Organization announced that Sophie would receive their annual Leadership Award for her work on preventing sexual violence, making her the first member of a royal family to receive this honor. The award citation specifically noted her willingness to visit dangerous regions and her effectiveness in translating individual testimonies into policy recommendations. The Government of Canada announced that Sophie would be awarded the Order of Merit of the Police Forces in recognition of her work supporting families of law enforcement personnel killed in the line of duty. This award reflected the international scope of her impact and the recognition that her advocacy had transcended national boundaries. These international honors carried particular significance because they represented recognition from professional communities rather than simple diplomatic courtesy. The awards acknowledged substantive contributions to important causes and reflected the serious regard with which her work was viewed by experts in relevant fields. The educational impact of her work had also continued to expand following the birthday celebrations. Several universities announced new scholarship programs inspired by Sophie's advocacy for educational access, while technical colleges across the United Kingdom reported increased application from students who had learned about available support through publicity surrounding her birthday events. The ripple effects of the celebrations extended into policy discussions as well. Parliamentary committees examining issues related to military welfare, violence prevention, and educational access all requested briefings on programs that Sophie had supported, recognizing these initiatives as potential models for broader implementation. Sophie herself had been deeply moved by the sustained response to her birthday celebrations. In a rare personal statement issued several weeks after the events, she expressed gratitude for the recognition while emphasizing her commitment to continuing and expanding the work that had generated such positive feedback. The statement also acknowledged the contributions of countless individuals and organizations who had partnered with her over the years, crediting them with whatever success had been achieved. The statement outlined several new initiatives that would build on successful existing programs. These included an expansion of military family support services to additional regions, new educational partnerships focused on technical training for disadvantaged youth, and enhanced international collaboration on preventing sexual violence in conflict zones. Each initiative reflected lessons learned from previous work and represented Sophie's commitment to continuous improvement and innovation. The personal impact of the celebrations on Sophie and her family had also been significant. Prince Edward later noted in an interview that the events had provided an opportunity for the entire family to reflect on the remarkable journey that had brought Sophie from private citizen to respected international advocate. He emphasized that the recognition had been earned through years of dedicated work and genuine commitment to making a difference. Lady Louise and James had both been profoundly affected by witnessing the breadth and depth of appreciation for their mother's work. In interviews following the celebrations, both young adults spoke about their increased understanding of the impact that dedicated service could achieve and their inspiration to find their own ways to contribute to important causes. The portrait itself had become a powerful symbol of possibilities for meaningful royal service in the contemporary world. Its tour had generated educational opportunities at each venue, with special exhibitions explaining the various causes Sophie supported and providing information about ways for visitors to become involved in related work. As the immediate excitement of the birthday celebrations settled into sustained momentum for ongoing work, it became clear that the events had achieved something more significant than simple recognition of past achievements. They had created a template for how royal service could be both traditional and innovative, respectful of historical precedent while responsive to contemporary needs. The celebrations had demonstrated that authentic dedication to meaningful causes could generate genuine public appreciation and support. Sophie's approach had shown that royal patronage could transcend ceremonial appearances to become a platform for addressing real problems and achieving measurable outcomes. The success of her 60th birthday celebrations reflected not just personal achievement, but the potential for constructive evolution within one of Britain's most traditional institutions. The lasting legacy of the celebrations would be found not in the formal recognition or artistic commemoration, but in the continued expansion of programs that were making genuine differences in people's lives. Sophie had used her milestone birthday to recommit to the work that had given her royal role its substance and meaning, ensuring that the celebration would serve as a foundation for even greater impact in the years to come.